Many economists have suggested that a more measured approach with stakeholder engagement and protective measures for vulnerable populations may yield more sustainable outcomes. We're joined this morning to talk about these administration's policies and reforms by the Special Advisor to the President on Public Communication, Mr. Daniel Bwala. Good morning. Good to have you.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
I believe it's the first time we're having a physical conversation. It's typically always virtual.
Always through Zoom, yeah. And,
happy to have you.
I must say you have a very good infrastructure here.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Thank you for the
I'm happy to be here this morning.
It's a pleasure to have you. I believe that the last time that we had a conversation, I think we were on the other end of the divide. I think,
really?
I believe that was the last conversation. The last time it's been a while.
Okay.
And you are at the other end of the divide. Now you are with the APC. You are serving in the current administration.
Right.
How has it been serving under this current administration?
It has been easy and exciting, and also fruitful in the sense that you now work for somebody you have worked for before. You know him. You know his passion for the country. You know his plan for Nigeria. It is also easy. Why I say it's easy is because you join at a time when he has already commenced the reform process, which means the trajectory of the country is being redirected on a better footing. It is also easy because you now have a basis to talk about what you believe in, the reform. At the beginning, I did not agree with the idea, just like my brother said in the introduction, that there could have been stakeholder engagement, there could have been measures put in place and all that. But I realized later, and especially in my communication with the president, there are certain information that are not classified, but are best known to the person who is embarking on a reform. When he took over, there was no money. You needed to have money to say, okay, in the next 6 months, I will begin this engagement. So I will have enough money to be able to pay this and pay that. When you do not have money, you're just presented a government with no money. The only thing you can do is to do what you have to do given the circumstance in order to pilot the country in a better direction. And thankfully, the economists, which at the beginning were very critical of the government, have now, I think last week I saw somewhere where they said they are all at Edem as to the fact that given the structures that are put in place, otherwise known as the fundamentals of the economy, that there is nothing to be worried about Nigeria. Now, the nation must speed up intervention so that the masses of Nigerians will not suffer for a long time.
This long time they're looking at, like, do we have a duration? Because now we're going to be counting down to the second anniversary of President Bola Tinubu.
Correct.
And whilst, you know, the number of the policies, some have said that these policies are bold, a number of people have criticized the policies. But the one thing is, beyond the theories and the rhetorics of what the economists say, the reality is what the average Nigerian and the average Nigerian experiences, you know, their experiences with detail that they have been suffering. Let me not say we have been suffering, you know. It's been such a tough time. So do we have an end in sight to when this suffering?
Definitely, there is end in sight, and but depending on what you actually mean by the end, probably the definition of the end will now be relative, because there are certain people who expect that probably in the next few months we should be able to see a 360-degree change, you know, turn around in the economy, where they will be taken back to that life that they were living based on borrowing. So, for example, you have a certain lifestyle you have, but that is because majority of what you were doing were paid for by the government, but you didn't even know how they are sourcing the money. And it was borrowed. Then also infrastructure was not put in place. Now that you are redirecting the country on a better footing, where Nigeria will work based on competitive nature of the country and not based on superficial, it is difficult to predict and say in the next 6 months or in the next 1 year, everything will change. However, it is a kind of policy that you are convinced that in the long run, we are going to have a total turnaround. But in the meantime, the interventions of government, you know, in one area or the other, has given succor or is giving succor to Nigeria in many respects. So, for example, in the area of agriculture, when this reform started, it was a bit painful that food items were going up and all that. There were certain superficial factors that were, you know, militating against that. Nigeria is a nation consisting of religious people. In a year like that, you have across the religious divide several festive seasons. So there are certain artificial inflation that is caused by business people. They buy the hoard. When the festive season comes, they hike it. Then you have other element of deliverables at the local level. When the president took over, 26 states of the federation were adjudged as incapacitated. They couldn't pay salary. Now we have revenue. They have money. They are paying salary. But much more than that, they have increased revenue to be able to deliver governance to the state and the local government. Now, state and local government constitute more than 80% of the country. The federal government is just small. Federal workers are small. So that means if the governors are also doing enough at their state and their local level, that suffering of the common man would have been drastically reduced. But the president can't command the governor. He can only collaborate and plead with the governor to say, deliver on your promise. So this is what we do is we communicate. You have to be honest with Nigerians to let them see that our turnaround will also be dependent on our attitude. I know people's families that are suffering to survive and can't see food to eat. It is very difficult. But you have seen the intervention of government in terms of food crops delivered. Then we will see revelation of how people store up government food program for the poor to be used in election, or the people will not be able to access. Government will make it available right up to the state and hand it to the state. But how the state administer the deliverables is another thing altogether.
Now, Mr. Bwala, the APC mandate, I mean, the president is not doing this alone, and you've said in several fora that you have unfettered access to the president. Let's just, in trying to understand the thinking of Mr. President, and if he does feel the pulse of ordinary Nigerians. Mr. President has told Nigerians to tighten their belts, but the optics are different. They look at the some of the things that government has done and members of the political class, and they feel, look, you can do more than enough. Beyond that, how often does the president really feel the pulse of ordinary Nigerians, or he just gets his briefings from ministers? And I also know ministerial, the ministers are meeting soon to defend their scorecard. Is the president hard on the ministers, and do they, and how often does he check his KPIs to see, do they check the ministers' KPIs to see if they're carrying out Mr. President's agenda?
So with respect to the KPI, I'm sure you must have, as the media house, covered the last assessment that was conducted, and then the decision of the president to restructure the cabinet. Some were reassigned and some were dropped. And he made it clear to them that it is a periodic thing and that he will take decision even before assessment or during assessment or after assessment, depending on it. Because the ministers are appointed at the pleasure of the president. And so he works with them.
Welcome back. We're still reviewing the administration of President Bola Tinubu, and we have Mr. Daniel Bwala in the studio, who was speaking to us before we went on a break as to if President Bola Tinubu feels the pulse of the Nigerian people. Please go ahead.
Right. So the president actually feels it. And that's why every time in his engagement with Nigerians, and even through the various policies and intervention, they are targeted at the ordinary man. You know, families that sit at night in the dinner table and complain about the future of tomorrow. When they put their kids to sleep and they go to bed, this is what works in their mind, whether there's a future for their children. If you look at Netfund, for example, it's a government program that provided soccer to students in school. That's the common man. If you look at robust investment in agriculture, that the president is collaborating with state government and in some cases directly with investors in that regard. It is also looking at the common man, because food, which deals with hunger, is a global phenomenon, and climate change perspective now, it affects the common man. So that's it's not about just knowing and feeling the pulse, but you have to do something to make them know that you're going in that direction. We provided credit materials. There is even a credit body that is created for the purposes of helping out people who have ideas on how to do business. And then above all, constant communication with Nigerians to have patience and look at what we're doing. Give us feedback on how you feel about the situation. And then we improve on whatever that we're doing we think we need to improve based on the feedback we got from Nigeria to make it better. Our worst days are behind us because of the structures we are putting in place. Could
you really say that yes. Our worst days are behind us? Would you say that with a lot of confidence?
Yes, I would say that with every degree of confidence. And I'll give you an example. Investors are coming. Why? Because they believe that if I bring investment, the structures on ground and the regulation will give me return on investment. And if you are a student, you are going to school, you don't have money, and then suddenly you are seeing the government providing funds to help you in your education. You know your worst days are behind, because behind you never had money. Then if you, as a country itself, when you look at we're beginning to export instead of importing product, as a country, when you see the way our image at the international stage is improving.
But Mr. Bwala, some would argue that if you look at the last calendar year, a few multinationals and companies have left Nigeria.
Yeah.
If the investment climate was stable, they look at factors like power, insecurity, and the naira stability as reasons why they left. Why would they leave in the first place if the investment climate was good?
Because most of them before now have been benefiting from rent-seeking, government patronage. That's part of the things that I told you when a family is living on a borrowed thing. Yeah, in fact, some of the multinationals take advantage of our people. You will see a foreign company in Nigeria, people in managerial positions, people who make decisions are not Nigerians. Nigerians at a lower level, they are least paid. With the structures we are putting in place is that you have to do things the right way. And so if you are supposed to pay tax, you have to pay tax. In those days, they could avoid that. If you are supposed to recruit people on the base of competitive capacity, you have to observe the rules. You cannot just tell us you bring somebody from abroad and call him an expatriate and then take advantage, or he's considered way above a Nigerian man who is on the job and in that organization. Most of those companies that are leaving, okay, there was a company, after some are leaving, came and within 6 months had a major breakthrough. So the point you would ask is, how is it that a company that is leaving now was comfortable to stay when things were worse, and now they're leaving? No, it's because now you have to play by the book. And a lot of people like cutting corners. If you ask people to follow the rules, very few people who are committed that will stay. And this is our belief. So however long it will take for us to put it in place so that the people will do business based on competition and not market dominance is what we are prepared to entrench.
Now, many of the arguments leveled against your administration would be the fact that as much as they've asked Nigerians to cut their codes to adjust, we're not seeing the adjusting on the part of the government, certain policies, certain actions, the strength of President Bola Tinubu's cabinet. We're looking at the VP's home, we're looking at, the presidential jet. And even if you go back to the Orosanye report last year, they were given, I think, 3 months. A committee was set up at the presidency
to implement the Orosanye report.
3 months, 12 weeks to implement the Orosanye report. We've heard nothing about it. So can you categorically say that the government is really doing what they, it's sounding like it's more do what I say, don't do what I do, because it doesn't feel like the government is cutting the cost of governance, and Nigerians are the ones that have to bear the brunt of it.
I think that sometimes some people, perception, they say is reality, so sometimes, but perception that is often seen as reality may not be reality. The president, through the various directives he has given over the last few months, has reduced the number of foreign delegates traveling with him abroad, has monetized certain government benefits. So instead of people having some of these things, it is monetizing your money. Has decided that unless government appointee is traveling abroad on official duty, they cannot just be part of his team and traveling for the traveling's sake. You see programs in ministries, departments, and agencies that funding cannot go to a ministry unless the funding is backed up by definite data suggesting that this is exactly what we want to do. And government is run from the point of view that the president sits in this presidency, but he has ministers and agents of government. Then there is citizenship engagement. The feedback we get from Nigerians helps us in reassessing our strategy in the way we go about things. If the president doesn't know, for example, what a minister or an agency is doing, and it has not been brought to our notice, we may not be able to know. But that's why the media, as a 4-day state of rain, operate very well, even though lately very few media people are professional because the advent of new media, there's a lot of cho-cho-cho.
And that brings me to this question, Mr. Bwala. Mr. President, if you look at his antecedents, it's a Democrat. He was with Nadeko. He also came out to protest during Occupy Nigeria in Ojota. I saw him there personally. I remember covering that protest. But these days, it seems there's a stifling of freedom of speech and the civic space. A few Nigerians have been arrested for protesting. We remember the incidents of the underage that were paraded and charged for treason and what have you. We also see the police using the cyberbullying law to stifle dissenting voices. What is going on, and what's the president's take on this? Are there moves to allow freedom of expression and protest, which is in the Constitution? Yeah,
President Bola Tinubu's administration, I think, is one of the fewest administrations that allow free speech. But this free speech is within the ambits of the law. So, for example, if you look at the case of this underage, as soon as you go to the notice or corridor of power, the president directed the Attorney General to go take over the matter and discontinue. That's how government responds.
But it didn't have to get there in the first place. I mean,
so he didn't have to get there, but the president sits in the villa. The president is not in my local government. The president is not in the police station. And the government is run in a way that it is only, even in your home, how would you know your kids outside playing? How would you know what is happening? You are not omnipresent. It is only when the report comes to you, you act. But what I want to talk about the free speech, and sometimes I think the media, not all of them, the way they report the stifling of free speech is not fair with the government, because cases are treated on a case-by-case basis. Even though there is a freedom of speech, but freedom after speech is determined by the quality or liability of the speech. The law is clear that you can say what you want to say, but you also must be conscious of the outcome of what you say. So if you commit a crime, let's say you say treasonable things, you have to face the law. And so then, of course, some people talk about the excesses of the police. Historically, the institution of the police needs reform. There are one or two activities of police sometimes that is out of order, that bring it to the attention of the government and it to be acted upon. If you have a live case and not just fictitious or hypothesis, if you have a live case, bring it to the attention of government, and government will take measures that is
But I think,
necessary.
part of the, and I'd like to refer back to the question that my colleague asked, in terms of protests, the president did protest in his time. The Constitution guarantees every Nigerian the right to protest.
Correct.
But we've seen that in this particular administration, there have been strong limitations. Oh, you can't protest, or if you have to protest within this area, or you have to give us notice and all of that. It does feel like all of that is targeted at crippling the right of Nigerians to protest.
So let me state for the records, Nigerians have the right to protest. Nobody can determine when and where they protest. However, the government has a duty to maintain law and order. So take, for example, the city of Lagos. Let's say protesters are out in the street protesting against the government on any issue, but then block the road, thereby stopping you guys from coming from your home to the studio. That means by blocking the road and stopping access to the road, there are certain individuals whose role also help in promoting law and order and in promoting free speech in Nigeria who may not be able to come. The last protest in Lagos that had the police had to move people is because the protesters decided that they were going to block the road. Even in America, they don't do that. They will announce that we're going to the Freedom Square in New York and we're going to protest so and so. We're going to be in so-so, because the idea of protest is to make government know your dissatisfaction or dissent about the policy. The minute you exercise of your right, block the right of another person, then the government's duty is to maintain law and order, because that is the duty of government. Otherwise, think of a situation where you want to promote protest against government, another person he wants to protest for government, both of you meet in the street and then you start killing each other. The government is irresponsible. But if the government senses that this protest is likely going to infringe on the right of others, it is a duty of government to do what it has to do to ensure that the exercise of your right does not stop the right of the other person.
All of this wasn't happening before the NSAS protest. It was after the NSAS protest we started to see that they were clamping down on protesters.
So I give you an example of NSAS. When NSAS started, I actually thought that it was an innocent thing. I was in Abuja, I participated. It started on Sunday. After church, I drove, and then I stopped by the central area, tried to identify with Nigeria, let them express themselves. For the first few days, almost a week or close to 2 weeks, they had all the freedom in exercising whatever. In Lagos here, they were singing, bringing parcels. Nobody had a problem. When we began to have the problem was when they came up with the demands. Governor Sanwo-Olu took the demands to President Buhari, and President Buhari said, I'm going to implement them. Some of those demands are not automatic. Reforms in the police. You can't do reform overnight. Now, after he agreed that he was going to implement that, a strategic protesting group with leadership would have said, okay, we then have to, just like the labor union, we're going to call up the protests for 2 weeks and see government action. When they fail, we're going to be back on the street. You know what those guys said? They say we're not leaving the street until we see those things happen. So they now start taking over the highway, taking over the street, thereby blocking people. And so in other words, you want to shut down the law and order in the country. There is no police anywhere in the world that will close its eyes to that fact. Now, NSAS was the beginning and the foundation of irresponsible protesting. Before the NSAS, all the protests that we've had in the country were protests that were organized. That's why they say organized protests. Any protest that is not organized, the government can't sit back and see older Nigerians did what the other time in Lagos.
So is that why they were shut down?
No, the government did not shut down these protesters.
Do you know who shut down the protesters?
What do you mean by shut down? As in the gun thing?
Yes.
At the Lekki
the number of people that were killed.
So there were a lot of misadventure by law enforcement, I must admit, and that's why there was a panel, and panel came up with a finding. But a lot of the other story was built on the fake news reporting of a CNN anchor, the reporter that did. Because some of the things that were peddled in CNN well ahead were over-exaggerated, and later they had to do a walk back. This one, you can Google it and you will see.
How about the live Instagram live videos? And I want us to quickly move away from this, but we did see the live videos. We did see young people being shot. We did see a number of them being killed at the NSAS protest.
I have not seen any video of an incident where there was a live bullet that shot someone. The videos that were circulating were videos after the fact. So you will see a video where people are...
No, they were happening in the moment. We don't have that now because
Okay.
NSAS was not part of the conversation this morning. But there were
you
videos
asked the
of
question
Instagram. Yes. No, it was because of the protest. I was trying to lead up to how we got to the place where it feels like the voices of the people are being held back. But at the time, it was a live stream that was happening. Live streams aren't doctored. The way that Instagram works, something is happening in the studio, the cameraman can have a live stream and everybody's seeing it in real time. And people were seeing it in real time.
So let me double down on that, because I'm sure you don't have a live video in which you see a gunman or a military officer shooting someone, and then you see the person drop as a result of that shot. All the videos I've seen, I'm coming, were after the fact. In other words, yes, there was a video of military people shooting in the air, and then there was a video of people already on ground, some in blood, in the pool of blood, people complaining. I am not suggesting that somebody shot himself and claimed that it is the law enforcement, but I am debunking the notion that there was a live video covering the shooting by a military officer.
So
it is also not a justification for a military or police officer to use live bullet on protesters.
Now, let's move on. Let's look at our democracy. Mr. President was in opposition for 16 years, and he remained there while PDP held sway for 16 years. Now, looking at Nigeria's current democracy and the way things are, it seems all the opposition is in some form of internal crisis or other. There's a lot of infighting and disarray, and democracy thrives when there's viable opposition,
Right.
Some have said that the APC is actually instigating this infighting in these parties, and it's part of their strategy to return to office in 2027. How do you respond to that, sir?
When you said some have said, I was assuming that you would have said, and we follow through to confirm, because allegation would always be at the door of the opposition. The job of the opposition is to oppose.
I mean, look at the NNPP, for example. The NNPP in Kano, most of their policies are aligned with the APC.
Right.
And you also have some people in opposition endorsing Mr. President for a second term when we're not even halfway through. So looking at those signs, you could conclude that, I mean, some of those guys are in cahoots with the APC.
It may be a right premise, but a wrong conclusion, because every Nigerian has a right, even if he's in the opposition, to support the governing party. I remember when I was in PDP, after the president was sworn in, I personally tweeted congratulating him. I had a backlash because they said, no, why will you congratulate somebody? And I explained, I said, I'm a lawyer, first by my discipline to understand the rule of law. Even though you're going to go to court, but until proven, he is the president of Nigeria. So it's the same thing that is applied to this allegation that the governing party is the one manipulating. No fact to support it, but it's a conjecture and assumption. And the governing party, I've not seen anywhere in the world where the federal government, the governing party will say, okay, let us sit down and organize the opposition. No, you would rather be happy that they are not organized.
You could have agents of the governing party. It doesn't have to come as official party
but
policy.
You could give me an example of an agent. I don't know what I get.
I mentioned the NNPP in Kano.
The NNPP, so a faction of the NNPP saying we support, I give you an example in Rivers State. Chieftains of Rivers State, I remember I saw Secondus, Mr. Peter Odili, and quite a number of these other stakeholders in solidarity for Governor Fubara, who is from PDP, also said that as far as the presidency is concerned, they pledged their support to Ashwaju, who's the president from the south of Nigeria.
I mean, that's a valid example.
That's the exercise of their right. So the fact that opposition ought to be strong does not mean because you expect opposition to be strong, you stop the opposition members from expressing themselves.
That's anti-party. It's in our anti-party.
But I give you an example of even in the governing party, Erufai, for example, he is with the governing party. He's hobnobbing with the opposition. Why are we not saying the opposition sponsored him or are sponsoring him from our end? Political participation is like sports. People are free to move. Constitutionally, you are freedom of move. The frequency of your movement is not restricted by number. You can this morning be in APC, in the afternoon PDP, in the evening NNPP, tomorrow APC. It is exercise of your right. It is left for the people whom you are moving from one place to the other to assess your efficiency or otherwise, and then act on the basis of that. So if opposition fail to coordinate themselves because they have misadministration of party affairs, you cannot from this side of heaven begin to condemn them. Most of these people in the opposition parties who are complaining about their right that is being infringed or about the fact that some people wanted to manipulate, they may have their genuine concern. But we are not the ones that will sit and say, let us organize the opposition. I think that the foreign step of the media are the ones to look into what they are doing and bring out the propriety or otherwise of what they are doing rather than pointing accusing finger at the government. We've never gone to their party and blocked the secretariat. We never participated in their party activities. We never do anything.
Right. I mean, you've talked rightly about everyone's individual right to move from political party to political party. Your most recent move being from the PDP to the APC. Whilst in the PDP, you are a strong critic of the APC. Talked about even if they give President Bola Tinubu 30 years, nothing will work.
I never said that. So this is the lazy part of journalism, and it is not with you. The interview I granted, let me clear that one today. It was on the 25th of December, 2013. I was being interviewed by Geoffrey of Channels Television. And while I was interrogating the policy of government and criticizing the policy, then I now said that generally if a policy is fundamentally wrong, 30 years won't fix it. After the interview, I think it was the next day, somebody coined it and said if you give President Bola Tinubu 30 years, he will never do anything. And nobody fact-checked it to go to that TV. This thing can be, you can go to the Google as I speak to you and hear it.
All right.
Till date, that is what people are parading.
Okay.
So this is the irresponsibility of some journalists not verifying. Verification is very important. The first thing is the source.
So let's thank you very much for clarifying that. But the reason I brought that up was to highlight how you've criticized the government. I mean, from what I'm seeing here, a tweet I have here, on the 25th of November 2022, when you talked about the human brain being miraculous, and then until you joined the APC, it stopped working. 2022,
Where
25th of November.
Where was
it's a tweet. You were definitely not with the APC at the time, were you?
So what did you expect from opposition?
So that's why I'm bringing this up. Is whilst it
the premise why you said
that. Yes, exactly. Why I'm bringing this up is whilst it is well within your right to move from party to party, but the expectation is that you stick with the party because you believe in the ideology of the party. So at what point did you stop believing in the ideology of the People's Democratic Party? And why do you now so vehemently believe that the APC that you once strongly criticized is no longer, all that you criticize? And does that not maybe in some measure reflect on the integrity of you as a person?
Yeah, that is the BS that oftentimes you hear people say. And on this your show, you've interviewed me on that. Generally, as a way of principle, once I have granted that part of interview to any media or specific program, I don't go back to that. That's why when Sheun, there was this interview we had, he asked me, I would say asked and answered. Because we earlier had an interview where he discussed this in extensio. So amounting to keep repeating after you've asked and I explained, to me is grandstanding. That's why I was saying like that. Now, the Arise TV of yesterday, why I had to address that was because even though I have addressed it in various programs within Arise television outlet, but that Cho program, the morning show, I have not actually addressed that in their program.
Sir, we actually would not appreciate that you do not disparage another show on our platform.
No, it doesn't matter. It's my expression. Didn't you talk about expression of freedom of expression?
Yeah, what they're doing their job, we would appreciate that.
So when it comes to the media, they are doing their job. But when it comes to the general public, allow them to explain.
No, I'm just giving you an opportunity to explain to us. I don't think that they have anything to do with...
You should rather be worried if we're off camera and I tell you cho program, it means that I'm not bold enough to say it in the public. I was in their program yesterday. And we discussed that. So, but the point I'm trying to say with respect to this issue is that political party is not a cult. You understand? Even in cult, people live cult. Religion, people change religion. Marriage, people change marriage. There's no aspect of human life in which somebody stays there forever. And there would always be a reason why you take a decision. Some of the reasons might not be ideology-based. Some of them will be ideology-based. Now, I have been a member of APC. If you have been in Nigeria, because most of you people in the media, you stay abroad and they come recently.
No.
Now, I have been a founding member of APC for 8-10 years. We supported until that election period. And 7 months was the only period I was away from APC. And then by the time the president beckoned on me to come, with all pleasure, and I committed to supporting him. And in all of my commitment, not a single day have you heard me open my mouth to speak against the person of Atiku Abubakar. You see, we have to be matured. All these things you see, obedient people controlling narrative in the social media and trying to muzzle mainstream media into social media journalism that is not fact-checked, that is not proven, that is emotion-based. It is not helpful. And some of these people who feed off of the rave and ratings they get from social media in the mainstream, in the legacy media, are the ones creating problems for the people in the legacy media. I give you an example of, I will not mention the name, but certain anchors who's primarily benefited from a particular demographic on social media hailing them. It doesn't cost. It is easier to fight and insult than to make. For example, if you want to criticize this government, you don't need to do research. And you just keep throwing. You will find a lot of people that will agree with you because of people's experiences and grievances. Okay. But it takes a lot to talk about positives because then you have to substantiate it.
Now that brings me, just before we begin to wrap up, Mr. Bwala, many Nigerians are hopeful and also anxious about the future. This administration will be hitting its halfway mark in a few months. And the president took some bold reforms. Some have said, you know, these are very good. On paper, most of the presidential candidates would have done it, but they talked about the manner in which the president did it. It should have been staggered. Fuel subsidy removal, for example. What is your message to Nigerians who are uncertain and anxious about the future?
You know, those ones that said should have been staggered, we ask them to give us alternative. They have failed till this very moment, right? It's easy to say. Some of the candidates, like I remember Peter Obi said from day one, and he was very vociferous throughout the campaign. But now, because opposition have to play opposition, he's condemning what he said. But we're not surprised. I don't feel bad when opposition oppose the government. That's the job.
That's the job.
That's where it is built. It will rather surprise me that the opposition are all coming down.
Not just opposition. Nigerians have to hold political office holders accountable.
Yes, correct. But with respect to Nigerians, this is where, for example, I take seriously any expression of dissent from Nigerians because they are the people who have voted to serve. Opposition can be used anyhow they want. Now, with respect to Nigerians, I speak hope to them. We are not saying that tomorrow there will be a change. We are saying that even though the reforms are put in place, we have already begun seeing this. I told you about education with NEL Fund. It has started happening. Told you about the credit program. I told you about the intervention in terms to the farmers, seedlings, a lot of subsidies here and there. There are various areas in which, look at the way food crops are going down. It's because of the reform that are put in place. We used to import oil, now refined product. Now we export to other countries. We export even to Europe as a Nigerian. That is how to come to the basics of how Nigeria ought to be. Our people used to have this idea of dependency. Nigerians are coming to the awareness that they need to be on their own. I was in a podcast, yesterday. I said, if people in media in Nigeria will take the bull by the horn like you guys, in the same country where people are saying there is a problem, you're able to carve a niche for yourself.
Yeah, but the ordinary man is feeling hunger. The price of things have quadrupled in the last 1 year. And if he's watching this program now, he will tell you that his reality is different. Can there be, what immediate solutions or message do you have for them?
So the
immediate... they live on a day-to-day basis. Some don't even know what they'll have for dinner tonight as a result of what has happened in the past.
Same with you and you. I'm sure that when you go to buy fuel or you go to buy groceries, I don't think they give you a different price from the ordinary man. So we are all in this together. What we tell them is that it will take a while for us to have that 360 ton, but we are not at that spot where we were yesterday. We've since moved away from that. To the ordinary Nigerian you talk about, in terms of, let's say, agriculture hunger, I spent close to 15 minutes talking about government program in agriculture. What does it seek to achieve? To deal with hunger. The education is all part of human development. It's part of these things. I know it is very easy. I hear this every media house I go. Very easy to say. It's a common cliche or catchword. Nigerians are suffering. Nigerians are suffering. But who is denying?
It's the reality.
We are suffering. I am suffering.
So who is denying? It is only when there is a denial.
Where's the human face of government to relieve them of this pain behind?
So I give you an example. How many minutes have we spent here? Close to 40 minutes.
Thereabouts.
Yes. I have talked about government programs, some that are already delivered, some that are already happening. You understand? And I told you about certain, because plan you have the immediate, you have mid time, and you have a long time. I talked about the immediate that are happening all over the places. But yet, in conclusion, you are saying, ordinary man is still suffering. In other words, you're asking me to regurgitate on what I've said. And that's because of the rhetoric in the media. It's easy to say that nobody is denying that ordinary man is suffering. What you have been interrogating is, what are the programs the government is putting in place to deal with that?
All right.
And that's what we have discussed for 40 minutes.
I want us to move away for a bit and talk about the rule of law and how well the administration has fared in response to being able to respect court processes. And in particular, I want us to talk about Nnamdi Kanu and how his case has been handled. The criticism we've seen that's been leveled against, the way he has been handled has been that there hasn't been any respect of the rule of law. There haven't been respect of the court orders. And right now, his case has been adjourned indefinitely, and there's been public outcry against that. We've seen President Bola Tinubu step in the arena when there was some fight between Nyesom Wike and Siminalayi Fubara. Is the president going to step in at some point? Are we expecting to see any movement in that regard?
The political differences between Wike and Fubara are not criminal offenses committed. They are political differences. The president is a politician. What we do is politics. And then when we get power, we then deliver. So president can easily interfere in political processes if you call him. He never put his mouth until they called him. When it comes to the commission of crime and the prosecution of those crimes, the president is not the one prosecuting Nnamdi Kanu. We have to say it for the opt-in time. If you commit a crime, there are law enforcement that will prosecute you. It would not be fair to drag the name of the president on the criminal justice system in Nigeria, because it means then you are differentiating Nnamdi Kanu from many Nigerians who are suffering from, who are suffering from either the inhabitants or otherwise of the criminal justice system. This is the
same administration. And at the end of the day, we can't, as much as we know that the president is not the judiciary, but the president does have some measure of influence. We've seen that this same administration is where they've pardoned terrorists. Yesterday, in the papers reported that they are de-radicalization. Thank you very much. De-radicalization of terrorists. So it somewhat feels like, they're de-radicalizing terrorists. People who are actual known terrorists. Nnamdi Kanu hasn't been tried yet.
Yes. Do you know the process for de-radicalization? You know the process?
Tell us.
The terrorists will have to give up. They have to surrender.
A number of them have done that before.
Yes, so you can never be de-radicalized until you have what? Surrendered. You can't be caught in the bush maintaining your position of criminality and you will be de-radicalized. We are tired. Either we were recruited, we didn't know, or we want to work with government. Then you will be processed to certify the authenticity or otherwise.
This process doesn't involve them going to prison.
Just give me 1 minute, so that we get that one clear.
Okay.
So they have to ascertain that. Then the government will decide whether still to prosecute you or as part of a broader picture to de-radicalize. De-radicalize means we are reducing the number of our populace going into that extremism. when somebody is standing trial who maintains his position, right, and the trial is in the process, it will be unfair to bring the president's name into it.
But Number one. There was an order that was given at the time talking about the manner in which it was, the extradition from Kenya happened.
Who gave the order?
The courts did. The courts did, and then they had asked that he be let go. But then it was overridden, saying that, if they let him go, he can escape. That? The government would be, of course, because it's the government that is holding him, isn't it?
You are not following the case in court.
I am.
If you're following the case in court, isn't there an order that he be remanded in custody?
There was later an order. That took a while. It didn't happen immediately.
Right.
So at the point when that order was given that he should be let go, the Department of State Security Services still held him back.
So do you know the judicial process of dealing with possible contempt of court?
That is for who committed the contempt of court in this case?
No, I'm saying that, do you know? Now, if you don't know, I will help you. But if you don't know,
I'm asking you, who committed contempt of court? Because in this case, Nnamdi Kanu wasn't the one that committed contempt of court.
Yes, that's why I said, do you know? If you don't know, say I don't know, then I will tell you how it works.
No, sir, I don't want to ask the questions here. We
can ask each other.
No, I'm not on the hot seat.
No, if you know, it's not hot seat. If you give, you take. That's how it is. If I stretch my hand to shake you, you have to stretch your hand before we can shake, isn't it?
If there's a contempt of court, I know that it is the court that handles it. But,
so the point, here's what I'm trying to drive at. Here's what I want to drive. If Nnamdi Kanu secures a court order, and the Department of State Services refuse to obey the court order, the assumption of law is that the SSS has disobeyed court order, is in breach of court. Nnamdi Kanu should file contempt proceedings against the SS. Not every somebody will come out of his service.
Beyond
the legal ones.
Beyond the legal ones, let's look at it this way. As the father of a nation, Mr. President is the father of a nation. Several senior Nigerian citizens, other statesmen have come out to appeal and said, we can guarantee good behavior and conduct of this individual. Looking at the insecurity situation in the Southeast, some have said, if you release this man, it would lead to peace. And those that have been committing criminality, hiding under IPOB, will be exposed. Is it not time we look at alternative dispute mechanisms to deal with this situation? Is it something the president might consider?
So everything in life begins with the person. Like, for example, are you a Christian?
Yes.
So there are people, they call them born again, right? Do you know how they became born again? They acknowledge their sins. They repented. They are forgiven. Their sins are forgiven, and then they become born again. Unless there is acknowledgement by the person in question, I am denouncing this. I want peace. She talked about the de-radicalization. Then government can intervene. You cannot sit where you sit holding that thought and position that is criminal, and then your uncle, your sister, your brothers are pleading with government to say, bypass all protocol and forgive. First of all, our judicial system, Nnamdi will have to have gone through the judicial process and be convicted before the president can exercise the order.
But there's still the presumption of innocence. He can't admit to what hasn't been officially said is a crime.
So if you don't admit, run through the process. You see, this the radicalization we talked about, they were not yet charged to court. Some of them while in court. It's acknowledgement. If you don't want to acknowledge, what's the basis of saying, I want to free him? Because some people say, if you free him, we'll handle him.
So
what I'm trying to say is, Nnamdi Kanu is not different from another average Nigerian. The press, who emphasize on the right of the ordinary man, and when they ask government, they keep saying ordinary man on that. You must talk about the real problem of ordinary people, rather than certain individuals that are the symbol of catchphrase and buzzwords. Somebody has to acknowledge his wrong and said, I want peace with government. I want to renounce what I'm saying. And then you can say, okay, there is evidence cogent to say that this person wants to live his own ways.
So, in essence, I think the summary of what we're saying is that there's going to, the government, the Nnamdi Kanu is going to be detained, and that the presidency will not at any point step into the arena.
The villa is not a police station. The president is not a prosecutor. He's the president of Nigeria, tasked with responsibility to govern Nigeria. Law enforcement will carry out their work, and then people in government will carry out their work. I want to beg the Nigerian media to not choose certain individuals and treat them as more special than other individuals. with the disproportionate application of principles. The ordinary man, when it comes to hunger, it is good for the optics to talk about them. When it comes to criminal justice system, you isolate certain individual. It's just like, let's say, corrupt people. Maybe there's a corrupt politician that's been in charge. Then some people will say, leave him. Meanwhile, the other people can be in detention. I made the point clear to you here. For de-radicalization to take place, there has to be acknowledgement and departure from your old ways.
We get your message, sir. So,
thank you.
But that message, we don't know if it's for us. The message should also be back. We have message back.
No, it's actually Moses to you to tell them, because they told you and you asked me.
Yes, but we're also giving the message that we get from the people back to the government.
To the presidency.
Which is
the presidency is that what we hear and the pulse we're getting from them is that we need to see the government cutting down on the cost of government. Yeah, that will discuss that for sure. We're not seeing that.
Effective communication of government policies, because there's a...
Why am I here?
Yes.
Only yesterday and today, I have granted interview. How many? We did podcasts, we did TV and all the places. What am I doing? I flew from Abuja. Communication. That's what I do. When the tax thing came, 32 interviews within 2 weeks.
Right.
We would always, and you're free anytime to call us.
We are going to call you back because we have a part of the conversation that we'd love to have with you, Mr. Bwala. Thank you for your time with us this morning.
I appreciate that.
And that does it for us here on Breakfast Central. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back again same time tomorrow. We, of course, will be bringing you, we apologize for not bringing you Which Way Nigeria. Which Way Nigeria, of course, will be back again. Maybe on Friday or on Monday, actually. We'll be back with what Nigerians are saying tomorrow, where we take your tweets and fill your polls. But until we come your way again, I am Olive MOD.
And I'm Benga Bora. Thanks for being a part of Breakfast Central.
And I'm Daniel Bwala. Thank you for inviting me. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.